Dragon's Dogma 2 has finally released, and with it we have a brand new world to explore and many more monsters to take down. But let's take a minute and get a little nostalgic. The original Dragon's Dogma had a class or vocation called the Assassin. This was a mix of strider and fighter that could benefit from playing solo rather than with the pawns. Just so happens to be the class that gets the most strength stat in the game when you level up, meaning you can really slay monsters fast. The sequel cut this class and combined some of its aspects with strider into the thief vocation, as well as getting rid of multiple weapons per class. Assassin actually had access to sword, dagger, bow, and shield, letting you use several different combinations of the weapons to really play how you wanted. Since all of these skills behave differently, and it's unfair to rank a sword skill versus a dagger skill, we're going to rank each category individually. Let's take a closer look at Dragon's Dogma's Assassin class and find out what the best skills were for each weapon. Starting off with the sword skills, we have Down Crack. This is a very short-ranged attack that thrusts your weapon down into the enemy and then pulls it out with tremendous force. Usually, it'll knock down all smaller foes and deal massive damage to them. Unfortunately, it does seem relatively useless on bigger monsters. You can use it on weak spots when larger foes get knocked down. However, it does seem largely focused for bandits, saurians, and goblins, and I don't see much in this skill simply due to its low versatility. A lot of times you could deal with several enemies at a time, while this takes out only one. I imagine it's really strong early on due to the high damage, but other than throwing enemies into the air, it's pretty outclassed. Broad Slash makes a swiping sword swing as you step back, giving you more of a retreat option that can also combo into another move. The damage is by no means exceptional, making it a utility skill first and foremost. Borderline useless on large monsters as their attacks are often much larger than the movement you step back with, and it provides no way to hit their weak spots or stagger them, making it for smaller targets only. And even there, it's just kind of okay. Giving the player something to maneuver around with in combat is definitely beneficial, as this can change your general direction without you actually moving the joystick, but overall it doesn't seem to provide much over other attacks. Intimate Gambit is quite intimate indeed. This is a very quick thrust forward that stabs into your enemy. As you pull the sword back, it hits multiple times. This doesn't seem made for big monsters as it decimates any smaller foe in an instant. However, it can be used on larger creatures as well. Because of the multiple attacks, you can stun lock even Cyclopses in place while taking out their health bar at a significant rate. It's only a forward movement, making it easy to miss if you're being careless, but it can also be comboed with things like Down Crack to pull in to deal high damage and then throw out, dealing even higher damage. Another option that's very strong early on and feels pretty mean to use as well. Great Windmill is one of the more amusing attack options that you have in this game. Take your sword and start wildly twirling it in an infinity sign. Then hold that attack as long as you can. It hits your opponent over and over, meaning if you can reach a weak spot, it'll trash that target in seconds. Solid for Dragonhearts and the goat head of a Chimera if you can get it on the ground. The biggest problem is it has no control. Once you're facing a direction with that attack, you're stuck that way, making it impossible to keep hitting a target if they move slightly behind you. Probably a great way to inflict torpor and silence as well, since the swings are so rapid. Clairvoyance, right off the bat, is one of any sword user's most fun attacks. You use this like a parry, activating it just before an attack lands on you. With very generous timing, you can block said attack and stab in, then out of your attacker. As you throw your attacker to the side, you also swing in a wide arc around you, meaning this not only blocks, but hits anything remotely close to you. It can be used to block larger foes, but usually doesn't quite follow up all the way. Rather, you want to activate this when groups corner you and annihilate them in response to just a single attack. Does require a bit of skill to pull off correctly, but severely punishes your attacker every time. Antler Toss is a large arced swing over your head. It seems pretty bad at first because you might want just a bit more height on the attack, but continue to use it and the power starts to shine through. Basically, this is your all-around attack. It's the best option for flying enemies, throws foes into the air, deals massive stagger, and can hit monsters' weak points without you actually jumping on them or first knocking them down. Very easy to land, deals multiple attacks, and can possibly hit several targets at a single time. The amount of stagger this can do should not be ignored, and since Dragonhearts are just above your character, you can directly nail that spot repeatedly with little effort. Powder Blast is a completely unique skill that only sword users on Assassin can utilize, and boy is it a good one. You set down a charge on the ground. As you walk around, powder falls out of your pouch, creating a trail. Activate the skill again, and a spark lights the trail, zooming towards the charge where it sets the thing off in a large explosion. This gives you a lot of freedom to create shorter and longer trails or bait a chimera onto the charge for the perfect hit. Additionally, the Powder Blast deals damage to areas you might not be able to reach. The heads on chimeras, hearts on dragons, and any weak points on a golem. Fantastic skill to have early on for some extra elemental damage and might give you the ability to take down monsters you aren't actually leveled up for. The hitbox is a little wonky at times, that is true, but overall it's extremely versatile and powerful when used correctly. Dire Gouge is a skill I never play without. I mean, never. What it does is jab your sword deep into an enemy and start churning it around. You can sit in a monster's weak spot and twist until your heart's content. Easily one of the best ways to take out large monsters, as you can climb up and jab them, dealing precise attacks that destroy the enemy. This is probably the most brutal attack of any class in Dragon's Dogma that feels disgustingly good to pull off. Half the time when fighting dragons, I just spam this, and this alone for the win. Being one of the few attacks you can even use while climbing, it's too good to not have when you need it. And it can actually make Damon a joke if you manage to cling onto his head. Not really for small stuff, but easily one of the top boss killer moves in the game. Funnily enough, they added a ring in the DLC to improve this skill that actually makes it worse. Can't improve on perfection, I guess. Burst Strike is the epitome of any sword user in both Dragon's Dogma games. This is a required skill to even play with a sword, as it provides the best benefit you can get. In an instant, your character sprints forward, thrusting their weapon. It deals very high damage and is one of the best movement options for any melee class. You move so ridiculously far that it gets you out of Dragon's range, away from large spellcasting areas, or just out of danger altogether, and you can use it to get into battle as well, shooting close to an opponent the second they slip up. Half the time, it's all I even use for damage on basic enemies. You spam this over and over while tracking to everything. The stamina, knockdown, stagger, and power are all exceptional for Burst Strike, and with a shield in your offhand, you feel like a force of nature who cannot be stopped. If this skill is available for you to use, it should be in your skill slots no matter what. Full Moon Slash is a slash left then right. During these two swipes, you're going to hit multiple times over, dealing incredible damage all around you. Nothing escapes the attack, and best of all, you're invulnerable during this skill's duration. This could be used to dodge any number of attacks that could prove fatal to the Arisen, and hitting weak points on monsters when they're down provides such satisfaction it cannot be described. Abusing the power of the Force Hatchet, which gains more damage on successive attacks, you instantly gain huge damage boosts. It's an amazing skill for Assassin, Fighter, and Mystic Knight that's very easy to use. The biggest benefit here is that Assassins might not all be using a shield to block damage, because this class can use a bow and sword instead. When doing this, Full Moon Slash actually becomes almost your only way to avoid damage, and at the end of the day, it is the sword skill that is good in every single situation. So for the Assassin sword users, we have the three best attacks in Dragon's Dogma being Dire Gouge, Burst Strike, and Full Moon Slash. Powder Blast is the honorable mention, making both Powder Blast and Dire Gouge the best options for Assassin only, as both Burst Strike and Full Moon are available to all sword/mace users. Then for Dagger Skills, we have Dazzle Blast, which will send out a large swath of sparks or mini explosions. This allows you to briefly stun an enemy or even large groups of enemies. Now, on the one hand, this can work well. In fact, it can quickly inflict debilitations if you get a direct hit. So rusted daggers make for great support here. And pawns with this can keep enemies reeling repeatedly, giving you time to do really whatever attacks you want. But I personally have never been a fan. It's pretty helpful if you're getting swarmed, but daggers have some pretty solid options, and this never makes the cut. Also, dealing nearly zero damage, the brief stun is not enough of an incentive to warrant using Dazzle Blast. Escape Onslaught is a very quick jump backwards leading into a forward kick in Dagger Slash. When spammed, it can deal considerable stagger damage and does do a good job of avoiding attacks. Sadly, the actual damage is really low, with the best daggers in the game just feels kind of okay. Again though, giving the player some utility options to avoid danger is always great, a solid option to have if you learn to love it. But there's no way I'm giving up one of my precious slots just for this. Not gonna happen. Plus, since daggers already give you a dodge, I don't think you need any more ways to avoid an attack. Okay, so Snake Bite is really awesome. This just so happens to be one of the more brutal attacks you can use with daggers, and it has several things going for it. You're gonna latch onto a target and pin them in your grip, then stabbing them with a really heavy dagger cut, often inflicting poison. Seems to do virtually nothing to large monsters, which is pretty odd, but all small enemies get busted up bad. The sad thing is, poison you would think is great early on, because it makes up for low damage with damage over time, right? Except poison in this game is excruciatingly terrible. Almost every ability tied with poison is worthless for actual DOT damage. In fact, rusted weapons inflicting both torpor and poison are only good because of torpor. So you're mainly going to be using this because it looks awesome to gut saurians and goblins, which is fun, but not doing much to monsters isn't ideal really. Cutting Wind is the most basic dagger skill in Dragon's Dogma. It rushes you forward quickly with a fast slash. On its own, this is great for movement and simply fun to use. However, if you spam it, things get really good. Spamming this lets you rapidly slash with near infinite range as much as you like, going from one small opponent to the next or cutting up one target real bad, even able to deal significant damage to monsters. This one can be a bit stamina heavy since you usually want to use it a lot in a short amount of time, but the results are effective for sure, even great for traveling around since the dash is so fast. Advanced Trigger is your elemental option. This is going to send up enemies into the air, then blast them with fire, giving you really strong strength damage, damage over time from burning, and high elemental burst damage as well. Tough to notice here as my damage is, well, end game, and honestly really unfair, but you can control your foes a lot better with this skill than with most others. Considering goblins and chimeras are weak to fire, this is an extremely powerful option for a large portion of the main game. Gale Harness does one thing and one thing only. It makes you fast, and I mean really fast. Almost every action you do is greatly increased. For 40 seconds, you have improved speed on walking, running, attacking, skill attacking, climbing, and recovering stamina. Gale Harness takes you from a fast and agile assassin to a completely broken and superhuman boss breaker. There's honestly no good reason not to run this as an assassin. It just makes the entire game easier overall and greatly improves when the most overpowered skills in the game, that being Scarlet Kiss. So yeah, if you gotta go fast, Gale Harness is what you want. Invisibility makes you immune to damage. I'm sorry, did you not hear me? I said invisibility makes you completely immune to damage. So instead of, making the invisibility skill have you less seen by enemies, they make you unable to die for 20 seconds. This skill is going to drain your stamina while active, but then you could do whatever you want during that time. Also, consider you can use Liquid Vim to have infinite stamina, or just chug however many Hearthspud potions you want. And now you can stay invulnerable the entire game. And funnily enough, they sort of brought this back in Dragon's Dogma 2 for the Thief class. So Capcom just wants the stealthy classes to be top dogs, I guess. And that really is all you need to know. You can take on the strongest enemies in the game while completely invulnerable. Weird, but really fun and definitely broken. Masterful Kill is pure perfection. This is a parry or counterattack, but the fun part is it requires absolutely zero skill to pull off. Once used, your character is going to stop regenerating stamina altogether. Don't make a move at all, and the next incoming attack is instantly parried with a devastating and really powerful attack. For small enemies, you jump on their back and slit their throat. And for big enemies, you're gonna uppercut with your blade, taking out all of their health. It makes you nearly unkillable and allows for free damage that often latches onto big monsters' weak spots, even if you weren't on them. Masterful Kill does have the one downside of flashing your screen red every time it's activated. Never really liked this myself, and it does does look awful if you spam it too much. But then you also kind of want to use it still because the damage is literally free. I mean, for someone like me who loves the satisfying feel of a parry but sucks at parrying, this is perfect. I don't have to try and still get that disgustingly brutal counter. Especially in BBI where things get really chaotic, this can save your butt over and over. Instant Reset is a skill that once you've used it, you can never run without it. Which is funny because it doesn't actually do that much. Basically, this cancels animations. If you're in an attack, you hit this to completely reset to a neutral state. Fine, but there aren't many times you want to do that. The most popular use for this is to cancel knockdown animations. When you get staggered off your feet or lay on the ground, this animation can take some time and lead to Garm or wolves grabbing you, or other enemies simply executing you right there. Instant Reset gets you right back up in a split second, so you can go at it again or run away to safety. Sounds like a very basic skill, but I'm telling you, ask anybody who's ever used it. Instant Reset's just required after you've tried it for its versatility and how much it actually improves the gameplay overall. And to no one's surprise, the best dagger skill in Dragon's Dogma is 100 Kisses, which in DD2 they made this part of the Thief's main attack. Absolutely bonkers decision that just makes Thief even crazier when you really think about it. Anyway, 100 Kisses is a spammable attack that has you cut repeatedly. That's about it, but the cuts are so fast that it outdamages most other attacks in the game. And on top of that, you can use this skill while attached to enemies. This skill looks insane and completely melts all monsters including Damon and Grigori. You're gonna sit on a dragon's heart and after a few seconds, the deed is done. It's honestly just kinda dumb to not use the skill if you have daggers, because it beats out anything else daggers have to offer. Looks really cool while taking the hardest enemies in the game and turning them into paste. Also, the DLC gave us a ring to make this even stronger. One of the most low stamina costs in the game that deals so much damage. 100 Kisses is literally the chef's kiss of dagger vocations, and why Assassin, Strider, and Magic Archer are all three loved far more than most other classes. And so with daggers in Dragon's Dogma, we have invisibility that can let you do anything you want while immune to damage, masterful kills, so satisfying, and over-the-top parries, instant reset because it makes the game way more fun to play honestly, and 100 Kisses because it's so unbelievably good. 100 Kisses and instant reset are actually usable by all dagger users, but masterful kill and invisibility are assassin only, which due to how they work, makes a lot of sense. Starting off with the shields, we have the launch board ability. This is where you crouch down, shield in hand, ready for a pawn to jump on you. When they do so, you automatically throw them upward into the air. The idea is to give you an easy way to get your pawns up onto the big monsters, since climbing from the foot all the way to the head can take time and eat through stamina fast. And I think this is pretty useless as an Arisen. Your pawns are going to miss the monster often, and who wants their pawn to be on the monster instead of getting up there yourself? No, this is best used when you put it on a pawn so they can throw you. In my experience, even this is not worth it as they won't throw you well enough, and climbing up to a monster really isn't that bad. Fun option to have that you can make work, but highly inefficient. Swift Castle is a quick push forward with you ducked behind the shield. It does no damage, impact, or anything but movement, and since this is your offhand, you don't really need it to deal damage. Offering a mobility option instead is actually useful, and the rush can get you out of attacks or into a monster's area safely. Extremely low versatility because it does nothing but movement, but if that's what you need, it will not disappoint. Shield Drum has you smash your weapon onto your shield and gain enemy attention. This is meant to keep the enemy on the person with a shield who can block while the archers, mages, and sorcerers do their thing out of harm's way. This is again a good option that can work for the role you're playing. I highly recommend it for a fighter pawn as it can make playing sorcerer 10 times easier, but as the Arisen I've never felt it necessary or really that beneficial at all. Still, a pawn fighter with this is a different story altogether. Shield Storm is a big old smack to the face with your shield. You're essentially going to beat the enemy to death with your defensive option, which is fun and hilarious at times. And this is the most basic skill for any shield user. You're practically always going to have it on since it's simple and useful when using a shield. Just something to throw into your combos so you can stagger enemies and break their guard. Nothing flashy, no, but when using a shield without this, you kind of feel naked. Enhanced Response I originally thought was useless and the worst shield skill, but then I found out its secret. You see, this skill has you parry an attack, then doing a twist up into the air, basically blocking incoming damage and then throwing you upward. This upward motion is enough to get you onto enemy weak spots immediately. No need to climb or even be thrown. You just ride up in that spot and you go to work. It is extremely good for both Cyclopses and Chimeras. It saves an insane amount of your stamina, grants more time to deal damage, and looks awesome in the process. If you can fit this in your skill slots, I would say it is a must-have. Easily the most underrated skill almost in the entire game that I had never used before this. And for Showdown, we have a very simple mechanic. You hunker down for a bit and then release some energy. This grants you a boost to strength while reducing your defense as well. It lasts 50 some seconds, which is absurd, giving you a 20% physical damage boost. Now, for those in hard mode, you already die in about 2 or 3 hits anyway, meaning this barely affects you as most attacks need to be avoided no matter what. And for those in normal mode, you can survive plenty of attacks, making this not a bad debuff at all. More damage for just running a shield is very much worth it. Plus, since you're a shield user, you hardly get hit as it is, so boost your damage and make life easy. Especially good to level into early on, so you have an advantage when you're still a bit weaker. Thus, for shields, we have the 2 best abilities, being one to get you into enemies' weak points in under a second, and another to buff damage. Not bad at all for shields. I am only sad they practically removed shield skills altogether for DD2. They're pretty handy at times. Starting us off with bow skills, we have Plegic Arrow. This is an ability where you tie an arrow up with something and then shoot it at the enemy. The animation takes quite some time and always annoyed me because other skills can shoot so much faster. If we go ahead and ignore all that, this is supposed to inflict torpor, the best status in the game that slows the target, and by a really significant amount, which you would think would be useful, right? Wrong. Plegic Arrow is one of the very few borderline useless skills in Dragon's Dogma. It will eventually inflict torpor, so not entirely garbage, but man, it's gonna take actual minutes of shooting one arrow over and over to get this applied. And in fact, it takes longer to inflict than it lasts. Or you could simply use 5-fold Flurry on a rusted bow and inflict it in under 2 seconds. Safe to say this skill is terrible. Skewer Dart is a charge-up skill that once fully charged can be shot to skewer through enemies, hitting one big target multiple times or hitting several enemies in a single path. And yeah, this is pretty bad too. It does very little damage. Also, the skill states it's good with poison arrows, which again, that status is just never worth using, ever. Now, maybe with sleep arrows, this wouldn't be too bad, because hitting an enemy multiple times would build the status quicker, but that's probably the only use as the damage just isn't cutting it. Pentad Shot is you shooting 5 arrows horizontally, spreading out your damage so you can hit several targets who are rushing you. This is great for crowds, and you could deal significant damage if you're up close on an enemy's weak spot. It is much less ranged since the spread is significant the further you get. If you're going to be in close quarters like caves and dungeons, then this is a must-have. It can put in a lot of work there and protect you quite well. But in open areas, it really doesn't seem that amazing. The big downside here is that this skill is inferior to 5-fold Flurry. That really is about it, which means I always use the latter. Mighty Bend is a charge-up skill that charges very quickly. Once full, you can let the arrow fly for high damage and high stagger. This is going to knock down enemies instantly, making it a must-have. All little foes are thrown backwards, giving you more room, and bigger enemies are going to be staggered more quickly as your pawns assist you. It is also quite accurate. Consider that assassins are more likely to play solo, and now you always want this so you can repel attackers. It's quite versatile, and while the damage is nowhere near as good as say 5-fold Flurry, it's still very, very good. I believe what is called Lincian Sight is the long-range sniper skill. As an assassin, you want to deal high damage safely. This skill lets you pinpoint enemy weak spots from miles away, quickly sniping off the little foes and then greatly damaging big monsters as well. The only downside to it is that it's hard to use up close, but by the time an enemy closes the space between you, they're probably going to be near to death. The more you get into your assassin role, the more you're going to make use of this skill. Especially with certain bows that have different benefits, the sniper style lets you tackle any situation before it arises. Love using this in BBI for certain areas, although it is much harder to use in those corridors, that's for sure. And of course, fivefold flurry is the best assassin skill when it comes to bows. This is the equivalent of knocking 5 arrows and letting them go at the same time. They all hit the same small area and deal insane damage. This is great for inflicting torpor in like 2 or 3 shots with a rusted bow, and it out damages a lot of other skills from huge range. Plus, this is really the only bow skill I ever use. No matter the situation, I can start letting these fly and cut enemies down in seconds. As an assassin, you can cheese Daemon or any dragon by using the force hatchet and then backing up to let this skill fly. It is stupid damage that stacked on top of 4 pariettes is just game breaking. In fact, this skill is what does it for me when it comes to this game. I think archery was crafted so well in Dragon's Dogma, probably the best it's felt in any game I've played. With enough skill, you can topple the strongest enemies from safety before they know what hit them. And fivefold flurry works up close, far away, against big bosses, against crowds. It's awesome. Being able to fire this many arrows this quickly is overkill, and I love it. So for the bow side of Assassin, we have Mighty Bend to deal massive impact and damage, Lancian Sight to get rid of enemies before fights start, and Fivefold Flurry since it is one of the best damage skills in the game, giving you extremely strong ranged capability whether you choose to use a sword or daggers as your main weapon. And there you have all assassin skills ranked in Dragon's Dogma. Full Moon Slash makes Fighter an unkillable DPS machine when using a sword. 100 Kisses is the best dagger skill overall for its versatility and raw power. Showdown when running a shield means more damage, and more damage means happy gamer. Then for the bow, you've got 5 arrows flying with fivefold flurry feeling perfect. Assassin has so many good options to run with that even with 6 total skill slots, it can be tough to grab everything you want. And it just so happens to be one of the highest damaging classes in the game, really making you feel like someone to be feared. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and if so, a like down below would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.